So, the IMF just dropped its latest forecast, and wow, these numbers are signaling a fundamental shift in the global economic order. Let's really get into this because this is way more than just statistics. We're talking about a massive power shift, and the math behind it is already playing out.
So, here's the headline number. India is set to grow at a staggering 6.6% next year. I mean, in a world where most economies are slowing down, this basically cements India's place as the new engine of global growth.
Now, let's contrast that with the United States. It's projected to grow at a much more, let's say, modest 2.0%. And look, this isn't just a one-off thing. This is a widening gap that has some enormous long-term consequences.
This slide right here, this is what that difference really means over time. At these rates, India's economy is on track to double in size about every 11 years. Meanwhile, it takes America's about 35 years. The power of compounding is literally about to reshape our world.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The head of the IMF herself, Kristalina Georgieva, is calling India a bright spot. She's praising the country for some really bold reforms, things like the goods and services tax and new insolvency codes that are just paying off in a huge way. If insights like this are helping you understand the world a little better, go ahead and subscribe to Voice on Pages. We put out new breakdowns like this every single week.
So the big question is, how is India pulling this off? Well, it's not just one thing. It's really a combination of four incredibly powerful structural growth engines all working together. Let's break them down. So we're going to look at four things: their demographics, their digital infrastructure, the absolute explosion of their middle class, and India's new strategic role in global supply chains. Honestly, each one of these is a story in itself. First up, demographics. And you guys, this is India's superpower. The median age is just 28. That's a full decade younger than the US and China. A staggering 40% of India's population is under 18, and they're set to add almost 8 million new workers to their labor force every year until 2030.
Okay, so here's why that's so crucial. A young population means decades of rising consumption. People building careers, starting families, buying houses, while places like Japan and Europe are aging and China's population is actually projected to shrink dramatically. India's demographic party is just getting started.
All right, engine number two is its world-class digital infrastructure. India built this public digital payment system called UPI from scratch, and the scale is just mind-boggling. Right now, it's processing 650 million transactions every single day.
And this just perfectly illustrates the scale of that revolution. India's domestic payment system now handles more daily transactions than Visa does globally. This digital backbone, which they built in just 10 years, has created the third largest startup ecosystem in the entire world.
The third engine is the rise of the consumer. Right now, India has a middle class of about 432 million people. By the end of this decade, that number is expected to swell to over 715 million. This isn't just some number on a page. You can see it in their markets, which are up over 18% this year alone. Let me try to put that into perspective for you. Over the next 5 to 6 years, India is adding a consumer market that's the size of the entire US population. And that brings us to the fourth engine, strategic positioning. As companies look to diversify their supply chains away from China, India is becoming the world's new factory. It already makes 50% of the world's generic drugs and 60% of its vaccines. And its services exports just blew past $150 billion, driven by high-margin IT and financial services. Government policies are turning it into a primary hub for giants like Apple and Samsung, not just some backup plant.
Okay, now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this equation. While India has these incredible tailwinds, the US is facing some pretty significant structural headwinds that are basically capping its growth potential at around 2%. And yeah, it still has immense strengths and innovation in capital markets, but these constraints are just mathematical realities.
The first one is a massive wall of debt. The U.S. national debt has now climbed to over $36 trillion, which is about 124% of GDP. I mean, a number that big creates its own kind of economic gravity, slowing everything down. And it's not just the government. Household debt just hit $18 trillion, with credit card balances at all-time highs.
And check out this breakdown of federal spending. For the first time ever, the U.S. is spending more on interest payments for its debt than it is on national defense. When servicing your debt becomes one of your biggest line items, it just crowds out investment in the future. This kind of research takes hours and hours to put together. If you're finding these breakdowns valuable, you can support Voice on Pages by buying us a coffee. The link is right there in the description.
Another headwind is the huge structural shift in the job market. Since the year 2000, the U.S. has lost over 4.5 million manufacturing jobs. That's a decline of more than a quarter. Employment in that sector just hit its lowest point since April of 2022.
And here's the tough reality behind those numbers. Those jobs, they aren't coming back in the same way. Modern manufacturing is super automated. Robots and AI are incredibly efficient, but they don't buy cars or pay taxes. This creates a permanent cap on traditional job growth and puts a ton of pressure on the American consumer, who, by the way, powers 68% of the entire U.S. economy. So when you put these two stories side by side, India's four-engine growth and America's structural constraints, you start to see the outline of what looks like an inevitable power shift.
So the key question really is this: what happens when these different growth rates compound, not just for a year or two, but for decades? Well, the answer is that the entire global economic landscape gets redrawn. India is on a clear path to become the world's third largest economy this decade, and by the 2040s, it could be challenging for the number 2 spot.
And you know, we've seen this pattern before. The last great power shift, from the British Empire to the United States, was a 75-year process. As you can see on this timeline, it was a slow, gradual decline driven by their diverging economies, and then it was accelerated by major world events. History just shows us that these shifts are gradual, right up until they're sudden.
Okay, this is all really fascinating stuff, but what does it actually mean for you, for investors, and for the world? Let's get into the tangible impacts. For anybody looking at India, the opportunities are just enormous. With GDP growing at over 6%, you could see corporate earnings grow at a sustained 12–15% a year. The real estate market is set for a massive boom as that middle class expands, and that digital infrastructure makes it one of the best places in the world to launch a startup.
Now, for investors focused on the U.S., the strategy really has to shift. Lower GDP growth probably means lower returns over the long haul, which makes the case for international diversification much, much stronger. This really highlights the long-term risks tied to the national debt and the status of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So I want to know what you think. Will India's economy actually overtake the U.S. by 2050? Drop your prediction in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you subscribe to Voice on Pages for more.
At the end of the day, the IMF's forecast isn't just a prediction. It's really a snapshot of a transformation that's happening right now, in real time. The mathematics of compound growth are just relentless, and the world of 2050 is being built today on these two diverging paths. So the only real question left is, are you prepared for it?